Who was the weakest link in the band The Doors? Let's talk about it. So of course, in any great band, there really isn't a weakest link because a great band depends on the specific chemistry of its members. But in this often brutal game, we force ourselves to choose a weakest link anyway. So if that idea offends you or you think it's stupid, you should probably just leave the video now. If you're interested in the idea, let's jump right in and talk about who might have been the weakest link in the band The Doors. So, one of the first things to say about the band is they're unusual in this respect. They had an unchanging lineup. They never had a member come or go. It was just the same four guys throughout their tenure. And they did regroup for a time with Ian Astbury in the 1990s, but we're not going to talk about that. We're just talking about classic lineup of Jim Morrison, Ray Manzarek, Robbie Creger, and John Denmore. I think another thing that makes the Doors a bit different in this particular game is that they didn't have a bass player per se. They relied a lot on Ray Manzarek to provide the bass lines in their live performances. So they were basically a three-piece band with a singer and no bass player. All right, let's get started. As far as Jim Morrison goes, I think we can eliminate him right away. There may be people out there who don't like him, but the fact is, The Doors is very much an expression of Jim Morrison's vision. It's his lyrics, he's the frontman, he, as far as the band having any kind of a look, he was the focal point for all of that, and they are almost responding to him as a band. And it's another thing that makes The Doors unique is that their lead singer is so charismatic that the band is almost in like a call and response with him. Now, Morrison considered himself a poet and he was very interested in poetry, so as far as his lyrics go, they're a defining element of the band. Whether you like them or not, they are a defining element of the band. And of course, then he's got this extremely important signature voice with his baritone vocal style, and it's almost combines soul and R&B with like a talking blues. So Morrison's off the list right off the bat. He cannot be considered the weakest link of the band. Let's move on and talk about Ray Manzarek. Well, I would consider him probably the most accomplished musician in the band from a technical standpoint, and I would also consider him perhaps the most intellectually capable member of the band in an all-around sense. All of the guys in The Doors are very sharp, but Manzarek stands out to me as someone who had quite a bit of intellectual capacity, and he was more than a foil for Jim Morrison. I think he actually helped Morrison attain his aesthetic and his ability to express himself. And I don't think Morrison could have done it alone. And therefore, I think that Manzarek is also an indispensable point for the band. Not to mention that his organ playing is what gives The Doors their special sound. It's very busy, it's very dizzying, it's almost like carnival music. And he's also the bass player, so far as they have one in a live setting. So with Manzarek and Morrison eliminated, that leaves Creger and Denmore. Now, so far as Robbie Creger goes, he's an extremely accomplished guitar. He's what I would call an 8-fingered guitarist, and that means he uses all of his fingers when he plays. He is not particularly a shredder, and he's not particularly a classical or a flamenco player, but there are elements of both pyrotechnics and that classical guitar that goes into his style, and you can hear that a lot on Crystal Ship, for example. But I think that he is an underrated guitar player. You never hear his name mentioned in terms of lists of great guitarists, and you never really hear him thrown around much at all as an example of a guitar hero. And I think that's, for one reason, it's because Jim Morrison was such a charismatic individual. But for another reason, it's because Creger wasn't very flashy as a person. He tended to just stand there and play. He didn't do anything. He didn't have a signature look. He didn't have a stage move to speak of. All right, and as far as Denmore goes, he is a jazz player through and through, and he has a very light touch on the drums. There's nothing in Denmore's playing that is Bonham-esque or heavy metal-like or anything like that. And although he's in a jazz tradition, he doesn't really sound very much like Mitch Mitchell. He doesn't sound like Ginger Breaker. He has a very unique style to his playing, and one of the things that I would say characterizes it is that it is a responsive style. Most drummers are setting the pace and setting the tone and setting the framework, whereas Denmore is more of a responder to the rest of the music. He echoes what's going on, and so that makes him unusual as a drummer. Now, whether or not it's an effective way to play is another question, and that's where I want to go right now. If I have to choose between Denmore and Creger as to which one of these two guys is the most dispensable in the band, meaning you could bring someone else in to substitute for them and not upset the mix very much, it's a close call. I have to choose. I'm going to say Denmore is the weakest link in the Doors, simply for the fact that his playing, while it is accomplished technically, isn't very standoutish. It doesn't have a signatureness to it. It does, but it's not strong enough to make him irreplaceable. I think that you could have brought in any number of other drummers into the band, perhaps even a heavier drummer that could have helped the band go into slightly different directions. But that's just what I think. What actually matters is what you think. If you have an idea about this or any other topic connected to classic or contemporary music, please leave it in the section below, and remember to like and subscribe. Thanks a lot.